Hello, and welcome to the We're Not Stumped podcast. I'm your host, Mike Boland, and I'm a congenital amputee of the right hand. In this show, I will interview other amputees and allow them to tell you their incredible life stories. I'll also feature family members of amputees and others who support the amputee community, all in an effort to discuss the challenges and triumphs of those living with limb loss. So stick around and listen to inspirational stories and find out why we say, We're Not Stumped. Well, hello everyone. Welcome to the We're Not Stumped podcast. My name is Mike Boland, and today I got Jeanette Jones on. Jeanette reached out to me from after she heard my season 2 finale, and I'm very appreciative of that. So, Jeanette, thank you so much for being on the We're Not Stumped podcast.
Thank you for having me.
You know, we always start the podcast with a segment we call In Your Own Words. So I'd like the listeners to learn more about you.
Well, I'm a 46-year-old hip disarticulation amputee. They're the more rare type of amputations, and I'm a little rare because with my amputation, it consists of the removal of a hip. And most people lose part of the hip socket, part of the pelvis, part of their butt, and my doctor got to save all of that. And I have a very small stump, which I was grateful that he saved all that. And because all he had to do was, when he went to amputate my leg, he was a little shocked to find that bone grew around the hip. Because I had my hip, femur, and knee replaced twice.
Oh, wow. And this is all because of childhood cancer, is that correct?
Yep, stage 3 bone cancer. It's called osteosarcoma, and it's a very common childhood cancer that goes into the long bones. It's also a lung cancer. And it never went to my lungs. It was in the upper thigh. It came outside the bone and spread to my hip, femur, and knee, and the bone, soft tissue, and muscle. It pretty much ransacked my leg. The original orthopedic doctor I had thought, well, if I cut her leg off as high, with the removal of the hip, she'll be in a wheelchair for the rest of her life. And she always included me in the conversations, being, 12 years old I was.
Wow.
Well, I don't want that. I don't want to be in a wheelchair at all. I don't even want to be in a wheelchair now. I want to get up and walk. I want my life back.
Sure.
That was right in the beginning of being sick, which brought us to the bone replacements. And she's like, well, I know somebody that can do all of it. I went to medical school with him. He's a genius. He's in Memorial Sloan Kettering Cancer Center. And she sent me to him, which coincidentally, he ended up being my orthopedic doctor, who I have to this day.
Oh.
I haven't seen him in 11 years. And he did it. But see, now they wanted to wait and try to shrink the tumor. It wouldn't shrink. It shrank maybe a centimeter. So between making that decision and the time of the bone replacements, I started feeling good. I wanted to get up and walk. The pain was gone. Gained probably 40 pounds. Well, time for the surgery, he went in. The cancer was completely dead. And surgery took 10 hours.
Wow.
And then within 2 months, my leg was infected. And he went in and did it again, which took 20 hours. And I didn't know what was going to happen in the course of the next 4.5 years. My body rejecting the metal bones. And I had the worst case bone fungal infection ever to be seen. No one's seen it since, and no one will ever see it again. And they still don't know what the damages that caused.
Wow.
Just what the chemo did.
Yeah.
So that when he was making the decision, well, it's time to cut the leg off, he gave me 3 options. He's like, I'm giving you 3 options. Here they are. We could take the bones out, put a spacer in. That means you're on bed rest for 6 weeks. To clear the infection up, and we could put the bones back in. Or we can cut your leg off. You get to keep the hip, but I take from your knee down would be your shin and your foot. But I put the foot on backwards and you can use your foot as a knee. Or I can take your leg off and I'm going to take the hip. What do you think you want? Option 2, let's use my foot as a knee.
So you tried that?
No, he was a little surprised. He wanted to see what I would say.
Okay.
And he asked for my opinion. And I said, well, Dr. Healy, I'm around your other patients that are my age that lost their legs. And it seems so much easier that way.
Mm-hmm.
He goes, well, to be honest, I can't do it because I'm going to eventually have to take that off and take the hip out. Your body does not like the metal. Your body's rejecting it. I said, okay. I guess it's option 3. Okay, you want to do it tomorrow? I said, no. We're doing it in 2 weeks because school just started. I'm in 10th grade, and I want to get 2 full weeks of schooling. Oh, okay. Well, October 7th, I was admitted. October 8th was the surgery, and I lost 6 pints of blood, and didn't affect me to the next day.
Wow. So I want to make sure I understand this correctly. There were several attempts to try to save your leg through bone replacement. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Yeah, the bone replacements was twice.
Okay.
I had like there were certain parts of the leg where the infection was attacking more than others. Like I remember I spent my 14th birthday in the hospital because I had the following. I was in the hospital from January to sometime in the beginning of March of 1991.
Okay.
And the prior fall, I found out I had arthritis in the hip. Oh. Because what happened was the hip was moving around in the hip socket, and it created arthritis. So one night, I remember I wasn't feeling good. I had this headache, but it was just a headache where it was a pain right in the middle of my forehead. But I didn't wake my mother up, being 13 years old. And when I finally got sleep, I was sleeping through my alarm because I had to go to school. So my mother woke up to turn the alarm up. So as soon as I opened my eyes, my pupils were dilated. She said she almost couldn't see the blue.
Wow. Because
I had blue eyes. She knew right then I was running a fever, so she kept me home. And she called the doctor. She's like, look, something's wrong. She's got a fever. It's 102. They had me go to my pediatrician instead of having me drive. My parents drive an hour away into New York City. It showed that I had an infection. They're like, no, bring her down. So they took the hip out, scraped out the arthritis, cleaned the infection. And that happened 3 days after my birthday. And they put a metal cup lining the hip socket and they screwed it in. And I did fine for a couple years. I had a blood clot in the knee, I think maybe a year and a half later. Finally, a few months later, I had the infection was affecting the knee, where it ate a hole through my knee and opened up part of the scar. Because when they replaced the bones the second time, they took my left latissimus dorsi muscle out of my back and transplanted it into my leg. So
I've never heard of that muscle, by the way.
Yeah, on either side of in the human body, on either side of the back are the two largest muscles, the latissimus dorsi muscles, the left and the right. So I don't have the left one. Ironically, that took beautifully. My body just didn't like the bones. So they cleared up the infection, did a little plastic surgery, they pulled as the technical term was the muscle flap, they pulled it down over the hole. I was all right for the next year. It was just really eerie because it was almost a year to the day of that surgery where they made the decision to cut my leg off. I was like, okay, but Within 3 days of losing my leg, I was up walking around like nothing happened.
So it was almost, I don't want to say relief. I don't know if that's the right term, but
Yes, relief.
okay. Well, I wasn't sure to say whether I should say that or not. But when I hear your story, I think about, boy, there's 4 years, and probably more than just the 4 years, but there's 4 years. I think you said 12 to 16, where you're going through a lot of stuff, the cancer, the amputation. What was that like as a child going through that? Actually into your teens going through that.
I missed out a lot before losing my leg because I'm watching my friends going forward with their lives and I can't do what they're doing because of that leg and the bone replacements
Yeah.
until I lost my leg. And I was like, wow, I got my life back. And exactly how it felt, 4.5 months after losing my leg, I started doing sports in school.
Very nice.
Yes, it was great. I was like, yeah, I'm just a normal teenager now.
For the first time in many years, you were a normal teenager at that time.
Yeah, and I didn't, you know, I, it was a great experience because we all look forward to becoming a teenager as
Yeah.
kids, but it was not normal for 4.5 years.
Yeah, yeah, it's through the sickness. How did other children or your peers your age, how did they look at you and treat you? Was it good? Was it bad? Are they supportive?
I had some very supportive ones. A lot of them didn't understand because we were just kids.
Yeah.
What kid, it's hard to comprehend because I always looked at my brother because he was younger than me. He was 8 when I got sick with cancer.
Oh, wow.
And I felt bad because that I know it was hard on my younger brother. And some didn't understand. And the ones I met along the way, I remember this one kid, I think his name was Elvis. And his he moved up from New York City to Orange County where I'm from. And he didn't believe that I had my hip femur and knee replaced. He thought I lied. It's like, come
Really?
on. Yeah, he thought it was a lie until I lost my leg. And I repeated it, finally got so angry with him. I repeated the story again. I said, what part of this don't you understand? And then he ran into me at Memorial Sloan Kettering Cancer Center one day. He goes, you actually told me the truth? Really? Do you really believe I lied to you? He goes, I'm so sorry. He cried. And I'm like, okay, I got to go. Bye.
Well, and as you mentioned too, I get your struggle was not only with you and I asked you about your friends, but your family that had been extremely difficult. You talked about your brother. I know we talked about your dad a little earlier before we started recording. How was that for them? How was your experience?
Like, I remember losing my leg. My mom was still really overprotective, and I remember telling her. I remember coming home from the hospital after losing my leg.
Mm-hmm.
We walked in the house, and I remember looking up at the clock. I still remember what time it was. It was 10 minutes to noon. She came out and said, here's your options. You want to drop out of school? I'll sign the paperwork.
Wow.
But I'm going to give you a few months to heal up, get into a leg, learn to walk, but you got to get a job and help with the bills. Or you can stay at home, but get homeschooled, keep up with your grades, and wait to get a leg, or you go back to school. I go, Mom, I'm not dropping out because that's what everybody expects.
Good.
2, I'm not hiding from nobody. And 3, I'm going back to school Monday. This was a Friday.
Wow.
She goes, are you serious? I said, yep. She goes, all right, you don't have a curfew. You can come and go as you please, but you got to keep your grades up. And remember, the last thing I have to say to you, she goes, don't get arrested because I don't have the bail money to bail you out. Okay. And it stuck in my head because I pictured myself being behind bars, never got in trouble, was on the honor roll for the rest of the remaining high school years.
Great.
And graduated with honor.
Congratulations.
Oh, thanks.
Getting to know you, that's not a surprise. You're very determined. And as you talked, and you had explained when we first talked what the amputation was, because as you said, it's very rare, and I had never heard of it. It's partial hip, or if you do you mind explaining that? Because I want to make sure I understand that part.
I have a left hip socket. There's no hip in it.
Okay.
I have absolutely no hip. I have one hip, and it's my right one.
So with that, I would imagine that presents challenges, for lack of a better term, when it comes to prosthetics. Is that correct?
Yeah, because it wouldn't be a typical socket.
Mm-hmm.
I
Yeah.
used to use prosthetics, and I remember my first one. It's like a bucket. I slide into it,
Mm-hmm.
and it wraps around my waist, and I tie it up, and it's got to be like really good cords, like strong cords,
Yeah.
and it goes right above my belly button, like up to my rib cage.
Okay.
The first one was soft, it was flexible, and I was able to move my torso.
Mm-hmm.
In a couple of years, I destroyed the leg because I used it so much. Because I was doing track and field, and I was shot put and disc thrower,
Oh wow.
and yeah, and I did indoor track during the winter, and I was on the swim team, which I was better at because I won all my swimming races. I just really stunk at throwing shot put and discs. I'll admit that.
Oh no.
Yeah.
Hey, you know what? You're out there and you're doing it, and that's the important part. So I want to make sure I heard this correct too. Currently, you're not using a prosthetic.
Nope. I stopped using it when I was about 20.
Okay.
Um, Now knowing how to use a leg, you know, even if you could go 20, 30 years without using a prosthetic leg and start using it again, it's like riding a bike. You
Yeah.
fall off and get up and ride it, but you have to get callus back up. But it's a hard bucket, and the hard buckets take away the flexibility of your torso.
Mm-hmm.
So I got my driver license right after high school. I wanted to wait till I was out of high school to drive because I didn't want to do anything stupid that was going to get in the way of graduating.
Mm-hmm.
And it was just so hard to drive because, you got to turn and look
Yeah.
in your blind spots. I almost couldn't do it,
Yeah.
and not using the leg, I think I had more freedom on my crutches.
Yeah, and that's what you currently use now. Is that right?
Yep.
You don't have
I
to
have
be
no
under.
idea where they are.
That's okay. That's okay.
There's a Canadian crutches. They go around the forearms.
Interesting. Okay, and that
And
you're able to zip around pretty well. I think you told me the other day when we first talked, pretty well with those.
yeah, and I still people to always tell me you look like you run with those. I go, yeah, I can run. I go,
Yeah.
you want to know how I had to learn how to run with one leg and on crutches? Was about 15 years ago. I was sitting outside of my house where I lived in Warwick, New York, and I call it bear country.
Hmm.
Nothing but bears.
Wow.
So I seen something in the corner of my left eye. Turned slightly. I'm like, ugh. A 500-pound black bear, just moseying up towards me. So I jumped up. I had one crutch in one arm and one on the ground. Picked it up real quick. By the time I stood up, he was 10 feet from me, so I ran. And then the next night, the bear tried to get in the house, and I had to learn how to run up a flight of stairs.
Wow. Wow. No, thank you. That's a scary story. That'd make me run. There's no question about that. You had said something to me earlier too when we were talking about how when you were younger, you were the only one you knew that was like you, right? And you were talking about
Yeah.
being an amputee in your school and how it really wasn't. I think, as you said, it really wasn't acknowledged. I'm really not sure how they would, but I'd like to hear that part of the story if you don't mind retelling that.
I remember going to school with this girl. She was a year behind me. And I remember being at her graduation because she graduated with my cousin, who is my best friend. And her brother ended up having the same kind of cancer I did.
Oh wow.
And we had the same oncologist,
Mm-hmm.
different orthopedic doctors. whose name is Dr. Boland.
Interesting.
He had to cover for my orthopedic doctor one day, and I remember he took the blood clot out of my knee. But he lost his leg, and they made the school district just basically acknowledges that he's the first one, and he broke the barriers and he broke through the brick walls.
Mm.
And I'm like, wait a minute. I lost my leg about 2 years before he even gotten cancer. And when I started finding that, I said, no, he wasn't. I was. Why are they doing this? And it could be the new teachers going through. Mr. Haller, my principal, who, God bless him, he's a good man. I was very close to him in high school because he had cancer, while he was a principal. We go to the same cancer hospital. And I don't think he would even allow that to happen.
Mm-hmm.
So I just, all right, let Drew take it, But, I moved out of the area, and, it is what it is.
Yeah, that makes sense. And when you said Orange County earlier, I want to make sure everyone understands. This is all back east where you're at. You're in Pennsylvania now, I think, and you talked about New York. Yeah.
Orange County, New York, not California.
Yes. Yeah, that's what and I just for fun, I decided I'd kind of look up where I was born and where I lived, because I think I told you I'm from New Jersey originally. And really from where you're at, we're only like, everything's so close there as opposed to Arizona where I'm at now, maybe an hour away. It's kind of interesting. Yeah. And I had asked you.
Where I'm from, it wasn't far from Mahwah, New Jersey. Mm-hmm. And I remember some of my friends and I, after losing my leg, would hang out with some Mahwah kids. And ironically, one of them is now my cardiologist.
Wow.
Which is funny because I remember meeting him when I was 17, he was 18 on the football field.
Well, you talked about your cancer and some of the things that you're still going through, and one of them, you just had a pacemaker put in, or is it within the last couple of years because of some of the side effects, right?
Yeah, the chemo caused a left bundle block branch, which means I had electrical shortage in the lower left side of my heart. And it just let loose. So 5 weeks ago, yesterday, I had a pacemaker put in.
Oh, and wow, yeah, very recently. Okay.
Yeah, and for a little over 2 weeks, I was really sick. Didn't know what was wrong with me. My other half commutes back and forth from Chester, New York to here, which is a 45-minute drive.
Yeah.
And I kept telling him, I don't feel good. My stomach is really bloated. My abdomen I have severe pain in my abdomen, and when I get up and walk, I'm so short of breath. And my mother always made sure, always have a wheelchair, she says, just in case you get hurt. What if you break your only leg? You break an arm.
Mm-hmm.
So thank God I had it just in case moment.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I physically couldn't walk because of the shortness of breath.
Wow.
So for 2.5 weeks, I was using a wheelchair.
Mm-hmm.
When he walked in my house, he froze. And he's a first responder. He's a fireman and fireman chaplain. He started as a fireman, got in a car accident. He's handicapped now, but they stuck by him, and he's their chaplain.
Very nice.
In my doorway, he froze, went white, and went, mouth dropped. He goes, "You're sick. You're going to the hospital." 9 times out of 10, I would have fought that. I said, okay, mm-hmm. But I got to get a couple things done today. So either we're going later or we're going tomorrow morning. Thank God, because we got to the hospital. I was telling all the ER people what was going on. They quickly signed me in and practically ran with me in the wheelchair to the back where the stretchers are, put me on the heart monitor. Like, you're in a heart block. All your chambers are blocked off.
Wow.
I was like, and they wanted to wait for my pulse to get up.
Mm-hmm.
It bounced from 33 to 40 by around 5. It was 33, went down to 32. They're like, we're transferring you to Scranton. You're going to have to get a pacemaker. I'm like, okay, cool. Is it going to make me feel better? They're like, yeah.
You're
I
gonna
said,
feel a
all
lot
right.
better, yeah.
Yeah. Well, my other half has a traumatic brain injury from his car accident that causes memory loss. So I know what happens when he gets nervous, and I said, look, go back to my apartment. My father already said he's going to meet me at the hospital. They're closer to Scranton than we are right now. Just hang tight. My father come get you. Anything happens.
Mm-hmm.
Went there. I stayed overnight. Next day, the surgery was done, and apparently I flatlined during surgery.
Wow.
And I woke up feeling great. I'm like, oh, I'm back to normal. My mother goes, you flatlined. I said, no, I didn't. She goes, yes, you did. I'm like, oh, I did? Cool. I didn't see the white light.
Well, I
Yeah.
think it's important if someone comes to you and said, boy, we got to get you in right now, you may want to go right away next time. You're lucky that
Yeah.
you're still with us. But look at all the things that you've gone through. I mean, you think about it, you have a pacemaker now, but the childhood cancer and the amputation. And when you look back on your life and where you're at now and where you're going to be going, what's something that you would like people to understand about life as an amputee?
Life is not that hard. It's it's is not as hard as we all think it is. It's a lot easier. You know, it could be much worse. You know, I'm supposed to be dead 50 times over. I was supposed to be dead at 50 times over when I was 12.
Yeah.
And I'm 46 going on 47. I'm still here. I might have to start back up with the walking. I lost a little muscle in my thigh. That's okay because I'm walking around now and I could go back to my normal activities next week.
Good.
And I would love to go back into the gym, but I'm not going to push it.
Yeah, not right away. That doesn't seem like
Yeah,
a smart move. But
yeah,
really, as I listen to you, I get the impression is just keep going, keep moving,
yeah,
keep pressing, keep moving forward.
yeah. Keep going because life does not stop at all.
Yeah, that's good. That's a very good way to put it. What's next for you now? What are you looking forward to? Now that you got your pacemaker, you're going to get your energy back. Anything you're looking forward to in the future?
I always wanted to be like some kind of a professional athlete, and I don't know how I get there. And it's funny because after going into remission with cancer without chemo, I had the doctors always said, Jeanette, if you ever go into the gym, any gym, do not lift weights. What will happen is your heart will stop for a split second and cause heart damage. I'm like, well, come on. I already have heart damage. My entire heart's damaged. He goes, they're like, all right, because of that, it will just stop your heart.
Mm.
So almost 6 years ago, I went into a Planet Fitness,
Mm-hmm.
got a trainer, didn't tell him about the heart thing.
Oh, I
So
hope
we
that was a good
started,
move.
yeah. But I told him the rest of the medical history. We started lifting weights. I lost 50 pounds, put on a lot of muscle, and I was almost getting ready to go there because I became friends with a couple professional bodybuilders. And Doreen, I'll never forget Doreen. And she just became professional,
Oh, very nice.
pro.
Yeah. Shout out to
And
Doreen. That's great.
yeah. So I see my as when I got my cardiologist. I said to him, I said, so tell me about the my heart damage. How am I doing with that? He goes, what heart damage? I'm like, the heart damage I've had since I was 12. Come on, I have severe heart damage my whole life. He goes, no, you don't. And it was a kind of an argument right there. I said, Dr. Kell, I have heart damage, severe heart damage, my entire heart damage. He did another EKG. He goes, you don't have any. What are you talking about? You have a left bundle block branch. Like,
Hmm.
yeah, I already know about that. So I told him, and he got, prior EKGs over the years from my oncologist. He goes, well, tell me how you had heart damage a year or two ago and not now. What have you been doing? So I told him. He goes, you're lucky that I didn't kill you. Just like that, pointing his finger at me, yelling at me. I'm like, yeah, well, it did it. He goes, what possessed you to do this? You know you weren't supposed to lift weights. I go, because I'm not listening to you doctors no more. I'm listening to my own body. Okay. And my oncologist gave me the clearance to do it. He goes, as long as you use a trainer, you can do whatever you want. If you can't breathe doing it, stop what you're doing. So, okay. Somehow it works for me.
Word to the wise: if you're not breathing, don't do it. I like that. That's a good one. So I know it's been a while, obviously, since you had your amputation. But is there anything that like you could share that, hey, this is actually a little easier than most people would think about being an amputee, and this is maybe a little bit more difficult than I thought it was going to be. Is there anything that comes to mind? I'm putting you on the spot, and I apologize, but
it's okay. Not all prosthetists are right. It's not always easier with a leg or a prosthetic.
Mm-hmm.
And I was always told, no, your life would be easier. No, it's not easier for me. You don't have to wear one. You don't need always have to. Yes, I might have scoliosis because I don't wear one. I might have a little bit of a spine, my spine might be a little out of alignment. But my life, it's easier. You do what's good for you, not what is good for everybody else. Not because your neighbor feels uncomfortable because they can't deal with you having one. Like, we're all going to run into people that can't deal with us or missing a leg,
yeah,
or missing an arm.
Yeah.
And I met a lot of people that just couldn't deal with it. And, God bless my mother, because she was always afraid someone was going to mess with me as a kid. And I picked up the saying, Mom, if someone can't deal with the fact that I have one leg, oh, well, it's either they can deal with it or they can't. And if they can't, they better get out of my way because I'm going to plow through them.
Oh, I like that. Yeah.
And I plowed through so many people, and I kept going. I didn't look back.
That is so interesting. I think it kind of puts in perspective. As I said, and as I started the podcast tonight, you had listened to my season 2 finale, and I said, and I told everybody on the finale, if you want to get a hold of me, please do. Here's how you do it. And I'm so glad that you did. because we're kindred spirits. Most of that podcast had to do exactly with what my feelings are. I really, and I'll just talk really briefly. I don't mind people that wear prosthetics, but I also think that it's a choice, and I think we're allowed to make that choice. So thank you for saying that. I appreciate that.
You're welcome. Because I remember my original prosthetist I used to go to, and he was originally in Whitestone, Queens. And he moved his office to Manhasset, Long Island, which was so much further away. And he dealt with a lot of athletes. He was like, no, you got to, no, I don't have to. Now, and I look back at it, Mike, I always liked him. No, I do not have to. And my orthopedic doctor, I think the last time I seen him, said, Jeanette, you don't have to wear it. You do what you got to do, but I don't want you to become lazy.
Yeah.
And if you eventually want to use a chair, get one that will work like a court chair, or where you get out and do sports in it. Because I think that would work better. And I would love to get like an old court one or a hand bike, because I want to get back into riding bikes.
Sure.
But I'll make it there one day to get it, because they're a lot of money.
They're a lot of money, and it's going to be a little cool right now. So you may want to wait until, because we're recording this in early November of 2023. And in Arizona, it might be beautiful, but I don't know about Pennsylvania right now.
Oh, it snowed a little bit yesterday afternoon.
Oh, yeah, okay. It is a little different then, I'll say. Definitely didn't snow. That's excellent.
I mean, nothing to stick, but it was just enough to like, oh, cool, look at this.
So are you going to be getting your crutches back? I can't remember whether you said you had them now, or you don't have to get them. Okay, they are there, and that's okay.
They're leaning against my couch.
That's fantastic.
Because you know what it is, I'm taking it slow, because it's been almost about 2 months since I've really walked.
Yeah.
And the surgeon really felt strong when she put the pacemaker in. She thought it was from Lyme disease, which I had 10 years ago. Didn't even know I was sick with it until I found a lump in my neck. It caused another problem, which was fixed. And it was like, no, it's caused from chemo. And my cardiologist had told her, don't, no temporary, nothing, put a permanent one in. So she went through the groin to put the temporary in. Even if you get stents and they go through the groin, your leg's going to hurt for a while.
Yeah.
And the only thing that's still sore is my knee.
Interesting.
So I don't want to hurt my knee. It's my only knee.
Yeah. Yeah, you don't want to hurt that knee, that's for sure.
Well, yeah, so I kind of been using my wheelchair for the last hour just to get off it.
Yeah, makes complete sense. Well, with everything you've gone through, and I think the story it's a big story. It's about childhood cancer and surviving that, your amputation, and now your pacemaker and surviving all that. And as you say, just keep going. And the story, I can't thank you enough for reaching out the other day and sharing your story on the podcast. It's going to mean a lot to others that are listening, because we know that there's going to be a lot of people out there that probably are, well, we talked about earlier, the family members maybe of a child that's going through cancer, and it's got to be a tough thing.
Because I wish I had this when I was a teenager losing my leg, because I didn't have nobody to really turn to, and I only had the drummer of Def Leppard to look up to, because he lost his arm after their third album. It's like, and I think that's what pushed me, because hey, he can come out of this and still play, but nobody's talking about it.
Yeah. Well, I saw earlier you have your Def Leppard shirt on right now, and a really good Def Leppard story about going backstage. I thought that was great too. So yeah, that's pretty neat. Yeah, I agree. It's getting better, I think, in society as far as the representation, as far as amputees. We see them maybe a little bit more than we used to on commercials and some movies and things like that. But it could always get better.
Yeah, you want to hear something funny? I used to have Sirius XM. And I did talk to Eddie Trunk one time, and we're talking about Rick Allen, the drummer.
Okay.
And he's interviewed him, and he's like, well, no, he talked about it in interviews. I said, but you're not understanding. I don't think you get me. You're not understanding this. He may talk to you guys about it, but me, the fans, we're not hearing it because it gets cut, because they're not letting the full story get out. We need to hear it.
Yeah.
So it's got to be put out there. We need more people to talk about it.
Well, that's why I thank you for being on the podcast, because you came on and told your story, and it's important. Other people are going to listen to this, and they're going to listen and learn. So thank you so much for being a guest on the We're Not Stumped podcast.
Well, thank you.
Stumped podcast, hosted by Mike Boland. If you want to be a guest on the program, reach out to Mike at his email address, mike@mikeboland.com. This podcast is produced by One Hand Man Productions. If you are looking to start your podcast, go to onehandmanproductions.com.